1. Hey everyone, welcome to the Roundtable with Vienna Whyte, episode 74. I'm your host, Millie Rouge from the band Vienna Whyte here in Edmonton, Canada. This Roundtable is a Yeg Music production. I'd like to introduce you to my co-host for today, Marissa Kay, who makes up the other half of our band, Vienna Whyte. Marissa, could you start by introducing the guests that we have on the show with us today?
Yes, so we have Tony Sergi. We have Danny El Rassi.
Hey.
Libby Scott.
Hello.
And Jacob and Caleb from
Hey.
Nautical Mile. And we have Samantha Sharp and Amanda McMahon. Sorry.
Man.
So close.
We always get one thing wrong.
I always get one name. I always mispronounce one name really badly. So welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for being on the show.
So we actually want to start off today by individually talking to each one of you first to hear more about your musical journey. So how you guys got started as artists and musicians, and just kind of give us a backstory in 2 to 3 minutes or less if you can, just of what your musical journey was like. So I want to start with, let's start with Tony. Can you start us off with what your musical journey was like for you,
I started in music when I was very young, after watching my uncle perform and watching Australian Idol. I was like, all right, I want to sing. So I pretty much got to sort of a festival and was hounding the compere all day saying, I want to sing, I want to sing, I want to sing. Never sang in my life. Got up on stage and kind of started from there and started performing, started taking lessons, then started doing gigs, then turned 16, started writing my own music, and yeah, it hasn't stopped.
That's fantastic. Now, Libby, can you tell us about your musical journey?
My musical journey, so I'm a drummer primarily, but I started on the violin, so transitions to a much cooler, much louder instrument, and and so I play in a couple of bands, and just want to play music and entertain people, and I think it was really fun having the violin background and knowing all the music theory relating to more of a classical sort of world, and then transitioning into like a more of a pop rock drum sort of circle. But yeah, that's basically me. I just play drums and have fun.
That's great to hear. Now, Nautical Mile, I want to hear from you guys. You guys are our only band, I think, on the show today. So let's hear a little bit more about your band, Nautical Mile.
Okay. So Nautical Mile started probably about 6 years ago now with myself and Dan started the band. He's not here today, but so we started the band. I had background in piano years ago, and then I studied drums at like a music university. And we sort of, went from there, and we've had massive transition since then in terms of our songwriting and how we go about our music within the band. Dan and I are solely writing a lot of the music for a long time. Jake's recently joined us, which has been really good. Jake's got a lot of ideas as well, which sort of mesh perfectly with our vision of how we want our sound to be, I suppose. Which has been really good. So it's been about 6 years, which is a long time, playing a lot in Perth, but more recently, if you forget about the coronavirus, we were doing a fair bit of touring to the other side of Australia, which was good for us. It's good to get out of Perth. Perth's not a bad place, but man, there's not many people living here, so it's exciting to be able to get out of here finally, because it's not everyone can do it. It's a bit stiff. So it's been a long time for me being in the band personally. Hopefully it's a lot longer, but it's been fun.
That's really cool to hear. And I just want to ask really quick, what is your genre of your band?
Sort of like a pop punk mixed with post-hardcore, if that makes sense. We pretty much primarily have clean vocals, heavier drums and guitars. So heavier instrumentals, clean vocals. So yeah.
Fantastic. Very cool. And Samantha, can you kind of elaborate on your journey?
Sure. So I started songwriting when I was 12, making very silly songs. And I took them to my music teacher, and she actually had me perform them in front of the whole school. So that kind of started me off in performing, but I took a lot of time off from music, thought I would pursue other things, wore a lot of hats. I was a personal trainer, I was a baker, I worked in retail. And then, I decided this is what I'm going to do. Like, this is how my heart is going to be happy. So I was playing gigs with someone playing guitar for me, and then I decided, screw this, I'm going to play guitar myself. And then I taught myself guitar, wrote an EP and released that. And now, I'm in Melbourne. So at the moment, we're in hard lockdown and I can't really do a whole lot. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
Fantastic. I know it's hard to be like, where am I right now? Well, I don't really know. Now, Dani, can you tell us about your musical journey?
Yeah, for sure. So my mum put me in singing and piano lessons when I was 5, and I was in the school choir and whatever, but I never really took it too seriously until I was about 14, and I started to sit at the piano more and discover harmony and chords and how they all work together. So from about the age of 14, I was like writing little emotional songs and all very angsty teenage stuff. And then basically I went to university. I actually studied law, which I don't know why I did that. And I wasn't super happy in it, but I did it because that was just what I was told to do, and I just did it, and it was really hard. But I got it done, finished the degree, and then after that I was like, wow, I don't know if we're allowed to swear, but I was like, screw this. I don't want to do this right now. I was really miserable. So I just completely ditched it and I just dove in 100% into music. I put all of my music together, years of writing, into an EP, toured with my band unofficially, and then started releasing more singles and did a national tour, and started playing cool festivals and things like that. And then since coronavirus, I got a lot more confident on guitar as well, and bass, and now I'm learning drums just because I have a lot of free time. So yeah, that's me.
Fantastic. And again, Amanda, can you just kind of wrap up your musical journey that you've had so far?
My musical journey's been kind of a unique one. I started out sort of like Libby. I first started out playing the violin, and that's when I sort of learned how to read and write music, which I loved. And then I went to uni. I ended up doing Bachelor of Arts in music, and I hated it because it was like all classical. And then I studied like some classical singing and things like that. Anyway, I didn't end up finishing uni because, like I said, I hated it. So I don't know, I was just like partying and being like a ruckus child. And I ended up meeting, I don't know if you guys know, there's kind of a 90s punk band called Unwritten Law. Well, I ended up meeting them, and well, not them, I met the singer, Scott, and we ended up getting married. So I moved to America for a little while, did the marriage thing, didn't work out, unfortunately. It's really hard to be married to a rock star because there's a lot of girls and a lot of drugs and things like that. So sort of wasn't really for me. So I came home. Actually, no, I went back and I studied audio engineering, finished that in 2018. And then I came back home and finished writing my EP, and I'm releasing a song on October 1st.
Ooh, very exciting. Very, very
fantastic.
Exciting.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone so much for sharing and letting us know a little bit more about your lives. It's helpful for us and as well for our audience to learn more about who you are before we ask all these questions. So we are actually going to talk about today something that you all have in common. We're going to talk about Australian music.
Surprise!
We of course know quite little about Australian music, so this is cool because we really get to learn and ask questions that we feel like other people in the world might have as well about kind of your industry in Australia. So our very first question we have here, I'm really interested in how supportive Australia is as a whole for music. I'm curious to know if Australia has any grants that are offered to musicians or how venues, for example, support their local artists. What does the support look for you guys like in Australia? And anyone can start it off.
So I'll just jump in.
Yeah.
At the moment, in terms of coronavirus, they've been pretty good. There's a few grants going around, and there's a few like funds that you can apply for, and there's where they kind of give you like a little sum of money to keep you going. Or there's a few venues. I'm just talking about Brisbane that are starting to open back up and still do shows where you're allowed to sit down. You can't dance, but you can sit down and watch. So a few venues have received grants to put on like a series of shows every Sunday. So it's slowly opening back up in Brisbane in terms of coronavirus, but generally it's pretty amazing. There's a big conference called Big Sound that they hold every year in Brisbane, and a lot of people travel up from Melbourne, Sydney, and across from Perth. And it's more of like a networking, lots of gigs and lots of like workshopy sort of things happen over a week in September. But obviously this year it's been cancelled, or it's all online, I think. But yeah, that's all online. Yeah. So that's like the little Brisbane pocket of Australia.
I think there's generally a sort of reputation in Australia as well that Melbourne is very much a hub for culture and music, and I think musicians particularly thrive in Melbourne. Not to say that they don't in Sydney, which is where I'm from, but I live in Newcastle right now, which is about 2 hours north driving from Sydney. And Brisbane has a really great music scene as well. I don't know too much about Perth's music scene, sorry guys, but I don't think any of them are particularly bad. I just think Melbourne is just incredible. And if you're talking about like opportunities for singer-songwriters and artists, I really, really often hear that if you want to succeed as an originals artist rather than a musician who plays covers in a pub, then Melbourne is your place to go. Whereas here in Newcastle, there's like a handful of places you can go for just an originals set, and you get paid, like, let's say a 1 hour set, we would get maybe $100 Australian for the 1 hour, or if you do 2 sets, $200. But yeah, I don't think there's a huge, this is just my experience, I don't think there's a huge market for the originals music, except if you're putting on your own shows, ticketed shows, which is then kind of what I started doing, because I was like, nobody in the pubs wants to hear new songs, they just want to hear Wonderwall and I don't know what else. So
it's always, and it's so funny because they never want to hear Wonderwall. They just want the attention of saying, "Hey, play Wonderwall." Totally. It's the most annoying thing ever. But anyway, that's really interesting. I never, because I mean, for us, when we think of like music in Australia, immediately we're like, oh, Sydney. But that's really interesting that it's that you find Melbourne is more of a hub. Really interesting. Yeah, and
I think, can I just say,
go for it.
Sorry,
go ahead. I read recently that Melbourne has taken over Los Angeles as far as live music venues goes. So that might have something to do with it. Don't know.
It's possible. It's always kind of been a bit of a hub, though. We do have a lot of venues, and I mean, unfortunately, they're actually all legally closed at the moment, and a lot aren't coming back from that. So that's really disappointing. But we have a really strong cultural. I mean, we graffiti our streets and call it art. So I think we're strongly into the arts here, and yeah, I mean, I've never had trouble finding somewhere to play. So
and also the audience members in Melbourne, like I toured there with my band, like people just want to go out and like eat dinner or buy a drink and just listen to beautiful music written by local artists. There's this whole appreciation, and it definitely exists in Sydney, definitely exists in Newcastle and Brisbane and maybe Perth, sorry again, but I don't know as much, but I know in Melbourne they're just like, wow, beautiful art and all about diversity and identification and stuff like that.
It sort of attracts all of those kinds of people. So there's a market for it, obviously.
Yeah, very clearly. And actually, speaking of markets, it's funny that you bring that up, because I can imagine that, trying to plan a North American / European tour from Australia might be a little bit difficult. So when it comes to touring, what are some examples you can think of that you tried to put into your planning?
I mean, we'll start off with this. So as from experience, we've toured Australia numerous times. From that, it's at the start, it's daunting and it's an actual nightmare, to be honest, because you're going out into sort of, I suppose, the unknown. Although it's the same industry, it's different contacts you're dealing with, it's different bands. The logistics, not to whinge or anything, but coming from Perth, we're so far away from the other side of the country. I mean, we generally skip Adelaide. I mean, it just has to be done. Sorry, Adelaide. But it takes it. So it's logistically a nightmare. It's you hop on a flight, cop a couple of $100 to get over, then add all your gear. And because initially when we came over, we didn't really know a whole lot of people organising, the van, the venues, the bands, the backline, sound tech, everything else, and it all has to line up because you're on a tight schedule, right? You're not there to waste any time. You're not getting paid if you're not playing. So it's making sure everything lines up. And if one venue in one city isn't available on the next night, for example, or within your little timeline you have, you're back to square one, essentially. I'm sure doing America or abroad that'd be even more of a struggle. We've not done that in the past. It's definitely on the cards, but we won't be organising that ourselves. We've done a few tours where they have been organised for us, which the stress was taken away, and that was great. So we didn't have to do anything. But our first one, we did all ourselves. It was a good experience. It's good to actually be able to appreciate the effort that goes in from the other side, like not just the artists, but everyone else in the music industry, which people tend to forget about. They're like just as important, because if they're not there, we're not either. So it's a big deal. But if you go about it the right way and just, I don't know, take it as a learning experience for the first few, if you're having a bit of bad luck, I suppose.
I have to say, sorry, I feel like I'm talking a lot already, but I have to say my first tour experience was very, very hard. Like, I organized it all and I had the band with me and my partner was in the band at the time, and it was really hard. Like, I remember every show, like I had this expectation that it was going to be so like, oh, it's so exciting. I'm going to drive like 12 hours to Brisbane. And I was like, fuck, I'm so tired. And we got really drunk at the Newcastle show. And then we had to get up at like 6 a.m. on Saturday and drive to Brisbane. And I was like, what was I thinking? This sucks. Like,
man, I feel that. Like, yeah, 100%. I mean, I've done that too, where I'm like, I play a gig and then I'm like, oh, we have to be on the other side of the province in like 6 hours. Yeah. And it's funny because like in Australia and Canada, I feel like are very similar in terms of like, you start to drive and you think that you're here, but you're here. And it's like, you've driven like 12 hours already. So that's really funny.
Do you guys drive a lot for your touring?
In Canada, it's a lot of just prairies and that's it. In Canada, it's just like a lot of just like flat roads and you just keep driving.
It takes about like 3 days if you're like adventurous to get across, like from where we're from to like basically Toronto, like that'd be the eastern part of Canada. So it's an adventure, that's for 100%. Sure. Not something I'd recommend, especially in our winter conditions. Sometimes it's less than ideal. So I wanted to kind of ask for our next question. We're actually in the process of making an album. We're kind of at the beginning stage, but we're actually having troubles finding female representation, because female representation is super important to the both of us. And honestly, we have troubles finding it in all aspects of the album. So kind of like, I can't remember who was mentioning this, but just in different areas, there's so many things to just music. It's not just the singers. There's more to that. So one of the areas we notice this the most is female producers. So I want to know what the representation of gender and culture is like in Australia. What do you find the representation is like in Australia? Is it well balanced? Does it need some improvement? What are kind of your thoughts on this?
I would say it needs some improvement. I don't know if everyone's going to agree with me because we are all in different areas here. I'm giving a talk on this tomorrow, but there is a distinct lack of sort of female gatekeepers in our industry. Even if there may be a perception that in the arts there's a lot of women at the forefront. I'm often told, oh, okay, because you're the singer, like you're the girl. But there's a lot of sort of men behind the scenes. I have never actually worked with a female producer, and I'm a bit bummed about that. And when I actually mentioned that to a friend of mine, she was like, oh, I know this one girl. Like, I know one person who can do that for you. And I was like, sweet, let's do it. But yeah, it's definitely a bit lopsided. Yeah.
I think Perth has a pretty good mix of females and males.
Of recent as well. It's gotten much more prominent, and there's been, specific events put on and so on. So you're definitely right. Like, I mean, if we're going back maybe 5, even 10 years, it would have been much less. Like, there's been a whole lot more effort and like awareness recently, which is good because, I mean, gender irrelevant, everyone's got heaps to offer, and if you're going to overlook one side, you're missing out. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing that they're sort of emphasizing that area which wasn't. And yeah, like say the same thing. We've not worked with a female producer before. I know of a few. There are a few over here. We haven't worked with them. Just we've been pretty chummy with a couple of dudes that make our music sound great, so we go with them because we're comfortable with that. Fear of the unknown, all that sort of thing. But yeah, I suppose it depends where you are. Like, it depends where you are. Some places are not going to be as good as others for certain things, I suppose, and that's fair enough. So I can't speak for where you guys are from, because it's potentially totally different. WA is a strange place.
It's a small place. Perth is very, very small.
Yeah. So everyone knows everyone. It's basically like, you might as well just say it's Tasmania, because it's that bad. Well,
far enough away.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting that you bring that up, because I think some of it might be the other way of kind of maybe not enough interest in that field, or maybe just not enough women going into that field sometimes. At least I find, like, I know when we both went to music school, like in university, so like that's kind of how we met. And I remember there was exactly 2 drummers in our year. So it's always a tricky thing for sure.
It's so crazy because drums are so much fun. Like, it's not like it's like a scary thing. I don't understand.
Right? I see Libby shaking her head.
I don't understand.
Drummers are the hardest thing to find.
Except for loadout. Oh man.
Yeah.
The worst.
There is not many of them around.
Yeah.
And you find one and they're in like 6 different bands. And you're like,
exactly.
That's always how it works out. Drummers and bassists are always like the most busy people in the world. They're in every single band.
Busy.
So we've discussed this on our roundtable before with our British music, and about the impacts of British music or the British influence on modern and contemporary music. What impact has Australian music had on the global music scene?
Ooh, have you guys heard of Parkway Drive? So they're like, I see someone put a thumb up there. So Parkway Drive, I feel like they revolutionized like metalcore music. They just did so well out of Australia, and there's a lot of bands in that era from like 2000 onwards that have just completely adopted that kind of sound, and I feel like they've had such a huge influence on that genre and scene. Like, the thing is, Australia is such a small place. Is like, if you really stand out, you really stand out. Like, there's like Polaris and Parkway Drive. There's all sorts of bands coming out of Australia that are really like killing it on the world scene, right? Like In Heart's Wake and Amity Affliction, yeah. Like
a lot of non-heavy artists as well. So like, Jake's right. If you can really nail it, people will notice, and it's just a matter of not being overlooked because you're from Australia. I don't know if that's a thing. Like, it's just that we're so far away, unfortunately, from the rest of the world. It's not that people don't like us. I think. I don't know.
It's just because nobody's awake when you're releasing music.
Yeah, that'll do it.
I don't know if you guys have heard. Oh, sorry. I don't know who I just interrupted.
No, go ahead.
Oh no, it's all good. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say, I don't know if you guys have heard of Triple J, but they're massive in Australia. They are like for certain genres of music, mostly like independent, very Australian music. It's the pathway to the rest of the world, mostly. There are obviously many other ways to get out there, but if you make it onto Triple J, you're pretty much guaranteed to, I don't know. Do you guys know what I mean? I feel like I'm not saying.
No, yeah. Triple J is good.
Yeah, it
definitely helps.
Exposure.
They do it for. They don't do it just because they're a radio station. They genuinely like to promote local artists. Like they have their own festival here where they just put local artists and national artists on. Like they are really, really supportive of the music scene here.
Amanda, I actually wanted to extend a congratulations for releasing your latest EP and for releasing it under your own label and doing all the mixing and mastering yourself, which is amazing, first of all.
Thank you.
That's very ambitious.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm really glad that it paid off, and I wanted to ask you some questions about that and to open this up to everyone too. What's the most important thing to all of you when you're finalizing your music, and in what it, in your opinion, makes for an okay mix versus like the perfect, absolute, solid mix? So Amanda, can you kind of start us off with this?
So mixing for me is kind of like painting. I don't think there's really like an end to it, but you sort of have to like just cut yourself off, because at a point you just keep sort of tweaking things and you're like, oh, it sounds better. And then you go to listen to it later and it's like, oh, still as good as it was before. So I think it's just about knowing when to quit, knowing when it's good enough, and then knowing when to quit, I think. And what separates a okay mix with a really, really good mix? I think it just comes down to the simplicity of each sound and how it's used. A different song can be made sound completely different. I mean, the same song can be made sound completely different by two different producers. So it's really just in the eye of the beholder, I think. So yeah, I mean, it's what you think is good and bad. Like, it's your definition of that as well. So.
What about you, Tony? Do you have kind of any thoughts or opinions on this question?
Yeah, it just depends really on, who's actually mixing the track. Usually you've got, well, me, myself, I've got other producers mixing the stuff, and, we've had Jack Joseph Puig, who mixed John Mayer's albums, work on some of my stuff, and getting his insight and how he does stuff compared to what my guys in the studio in Melbourne do, and them taking stuff from him and putting it in the mixes that we mixed here. It's, two completely different ways of working. Both of them work, but the end product is. So it's all about personal preference. Jack really showed us, what to do and how to do stuff his way to make it all sound streamlined for, every song that we put out.
Yeah, and I always find that it's always the hardest thing too to like listen back and really enjoy what you're listening to. Yeah, and I mean, like, also having the control over being able to do it yourself versus kind of sitting in a room with a producer who's doing it for you. I know for me, sometimes when the producer's going through and it's like, all right, let's use this take, and you're like, and then they make it sound good. You're like, all right, okay, fine, we're good.
Sometimes it's getting a fresh set of ears as well. Like, sometimes you've heard the song about 500 times and you listen to it again, you're just like, you need someone else to come in with a fresh set of ears and say, okay, we need this, we need that.
Yeah. Someone qualified, not just your mom.
Yeah, no, not just your mom, because your mom's
definitely someone qualified.
Yeah. And it always gets to that point too. I mean, like I think our first album we released was a Christmas album of all things. So there's definitely some times where we annoy each other, and I just start to sing her Christmas song to her. She's like, shut up,
don't make fun of me.
But I like to make fun of you because it's fun. But anyway, moving right along. So here in the Great White North, it's starting to get a little bit colder here. It's still warm enough that we can wear a light jacket, but it's getting a little bit nippy here.
Yeah.
So the climate is basically freezing cold, filled with snow for a good 8 months of the year, and busking is quite difficult in that kind of weather condition. So what's the outdoor music lifestyle or busking environment like in Australia? Does anyone have any firsthand experience with this, and what do you find are the main challenges?
I do. Melbourne has an awesome busking scene. I hold a permit for the city of Melbourne, and I only actually got to use it twice before we went into lockdown. So both times it was about finding a spot that wasn't already taken, because there are so many people who want to be busking. We have a separate permit just for our one of our biggest areas for it, which is the Burke Street Mall. People have been picked up by labels playing there. So it's a really big sort of...
And that way Sultana was picked up?
Sultana, yes. Tash Sultana was playing the Burke Street Mall. And so she had to have a separate permit. We actually have to audition to be allowed to play there. So that's pretty intense. I haven't got to that point yet because I only used my actual permit twice before we got locked down. But I actually used to busk every single weekend. We have a really thriving like farmers market culture here as well, and I play farmers markets pretty much every weekend as a busker. So yeah, the weather can be challenging because especially in Melbourne being quite south, we find that it gets freezing cold, but it also gets bloody boiling hot. So I have many outfit changes usually with me, but yeah, it's awesome. I really miss busking. I keep saying that. I've been saying it all week. I'm like, I just want to go out and busk. But
lockdown talking.
Yeah, and for anybody,
can't do it right now, but it's awesome. It's awesome.
Oh yeah, no, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's hilarious too because that's very much what it's like in Edmonton. Like if you wake up in the morning, it'll be super cold and you're like, all right, got to go put on a sweater, and then you walk out like an hour later and it's super sunny and you're like, all right. But yeah, so for anybody who's watching right now on Reddit, so we've gotten a couple comments here. So we're doing a little interview with a bunch of Australian artists here, and we're very happy to have you guys. We actually had a question earlier on. Where Sam EY says, I'm Australian and mostly listen to Australian music. What artists do you guys know? So if you had to shoot off your quick artists really, really quickly, who are some of your favorite Australian artists that you could give us?
I'm a huge fan of Trophy Eyes. They're a Newcastle-based, I don't know.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought you guys might like them.
Our first show ever we played with them was cool.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
That's
Wow.
awesome.
My Siri just got activated. Sorry. I don't know if you guys heard that. Every time I say the word serious.
Mine too. She hates it when I say that word.
So funny. Sorry. Who's next?
The Regime. I absolutely love The Regime.
I'll go Silverchair.
Oh, yeah.
They're awesome.
G Flip. Big fan. She's a really cool drummer.
Carnival.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was gonna say G Flip for sure.
Yes.
I reckon there's a few like really good producers and bands coming up that will like explode into the world hopefully once coronavirus is all over. But I would say Alice Ivy. She's a female producer, and she's very cool.
Yeah, I love it. Thanks. There we go. Thanks so much for giving those recommendations. Appreciate it. So there you go. Whoever asked that question. Yeah, I'm very excited to dive into the Australian music scene a little bit more because it sounds like it's really like bumping.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just crazy how we in Canada, as far as it seems, like I have never heard of these artists before, and it's like, are we really that far apart? I guess we really are, but there's just a surplus of so much music in general. But to kind of finish off this roundtable here, Marissa and I like to help our younger audience. We actually get quite a few questions on Reddit, like, how did you start music? How did you do like what you're doing now to get to the point you are now? So we like to help our younger audience with informative advice on becoming a musician, as we can really only speak from a Canadian perspective. We were wondering what advice you would all offer to any aspiring younger Australian artists who want to get out there in the music scene.
Grind. Work hard. Don't stop.
Yeah, get really good at your instrument or your writing or whatever it is. Just work hard. Wake up earlier than you have to. Practice your guitar, your drums, get lessons, network. I don't know.
Yeah. I think I think the main part is like putting the time in. Like it's easy to get disheartened when something doesn't go right or you can't play the song still. But like if you know you haven't been practicing, you're not going to be able to play it. That's the thing. Like you see it a lot here. Like everyone's got best intentions, but if you not going to put the time aside, you're not going to get the end result. That's with anything. It's not just music. I think that's the main thing. But also just, I don't know, keep digging at it. I suppose like the music industry is a bit of a roller coaster, so it's not always going to go to plan, as we know. But it is putting the time in. The time and effort. It's everything.
And I think also don't forget the reason why you got into music in the first place, because sometimes when things are getting difficult and you just want to give up, that's kind of what I think of, and it sort of gets me a bit motivated again.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of what you guys are saying are a lot of what we would say in Canada too. So I like that that's like a universal thing. I love it. And I mean, I think another great thing, at least from the Canadian perspective for us, is we always like to define our definition of success. So being like, you need to know when you've made it. It's tricky because like you can't do music to just be like, oh, I want to make a lot we will all laugh together. But
it's like the opposite of what's going to happen if you get into music.
It's the last thing that's going to happen.
100%.
Well, it's like the last thing you have to expect, right? You have to do it for the right reason.
Put it like right at the end of the list of things that could possibly happen.
And
like as a piece of advice, my huge one is just to do it. Like just start and just do it, because I actually put it off for a really long time thinking like this isn't a viable thing to do and it's not a real career. And then once I actually decided to put time and effort into it, it's like, oh, okay, so this is a thing, and now it's actually my full-time job now. So, you know, it just do it, even if you don't think that you can, just do it, and be educated. Always keep. I'm really like cerebral. I read a lot, so reading on like Australian, you know, music history and how labels work and doing online courses. Like you just keep yourself educated, keep your mindset right, and that will help.
And what about some advice of just for someone who is in Australia and they're like trying to make it in the music scene there? Like what's something that you think would work for someone who is either coming to Australia or living in Australia, who maybe that would be the best advice for them to kind of gain some footing. To gain some footing there. Because I mean, for us in Edmonton, we would say like start locally and like really get a good community going there, and then start to branch out. Like if it were us, we'd be like, don't go to Toronto. Like you're going to flop if you go to Toronto right away. So it's like for us, it's like we start everything locally. But I don't know if it's the same for you guys.
I'd say the same.
Definitely.
Like go to one city, go to a bunch of open mics, meet each other, meet the people who run the open mics. You don't know what opportunities come up. Get good at your craft, etc., and then start moving cities.
I think networking is huge. With Perth, because it's such a small scene and everyone knows each other, just doors open everywhere. There's always a door somewhere where one closes, another one opens. Like people offer you shows, or you need supports, or there's just doors everywhere. It's just good. The more people you know, the more opportunities. As with anything, but definitely with music, it's important.
100%. you don't know who knows who, so
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
everybody knows everybody, especially in the Sydney scene. So just
Yeah.
network with
And
everybody.
Melbourne's like that too.
Can I ask a question actually for Libby? Is that all right? It's a bit off
Yeah, go for it. Please do.
track. But did you say you play in multiple bands or just like the one or?
Well, the main band at the moment is called Pink Matter. And
Yeah.
so it's like originals, and then I play for another artist called Phoebe Sinclair,
Oh,
and another
sick.
artist called Peppermint Ollie. But at the moment they're all on the back burner. But yeah, no, I was gonna just put in there like you have to also be like a good person. I feel like there's like you can know your instrument really well and you can have all the right contacts, but if you're not like fun to hang out with on the back of a bus, or you're not fun to be in rehearsal with, then no one's like, you're not really going to get very far, or you're going to get somewhere and straight down, like you'll hit the roller coaster down.
Yeah.
So
There's a lot of ego in music, and they get weeded out pretty quickly.
yeah.
You get a name for yourself.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah,
other thing.
well, and that's the thing here too, I'd say, is that you have to really make sure that you work well with others. Is like that's the first thing you put on your resume, should also be the first thing that you think of when you're a musician.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that was actually our last question of the day. We are out of time, but we are so lucky to have had all of our guests on today. If you guys at home are watching this roundtable with Vienna Whyte on Twitch or Reddit, make sure to follow us to be notified about all of our upcoming shows throughout the week. If podcasts are more your style, make sure to search up Vienna Whyte Podcast to start listening. I'm Millie Rouge, one of your hosts, and this is Marissa Kay, our other lovely host. Marissa, where can you find our band on the internet?
You can find our band at www.viennawhite.com, spelled with a Y because we're trendy. Or you can find us on Instagram at Vienna Whyte.
Beautiful. So I'm going to ask each of you to sign yourselves out. So please tell the audience once again your stage name and where our audience can find you on social media. So Libby, can you sign yourself out first?
Yeah, cool. Thanks so much for having me, guys. This has been really fun. I'm Libby Scotty on Instagram, and I play in a band called Pink Matter. We just released our first single as a 3-piece, so you can go check that all out. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And Nautical Mile, can you guys sign yourselves out?
Yes, I'm Caleb.
I'm Jake.
Jake. You can find us all the usual spots: Spotify, Apple Music, website, Instagram, Facebook, Amazon Music, all the other places. I don't know. They put the music up. We just smile and wave. So yeah, all the usual spots though. Just search us up, YouTube, all that. So yeah, check us out if you haven't.
Awesome. And Samantha.
Yeah, so you can find me on all the same music places, Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, Deezer, Amazon, not fully sure. I'm on Instagram at Samantha Sharp Music. Facebook's the same. Twitter is actually Sharp Sings because it was too long. And yeah, I've got stuff online, so you should find it.
Fantastic. And Amanda.
Yeah, so I'm Amanda McMahon. I have a single coming out on the 1st of October called Blue Eyed Blues. That's going to be out on all those same platforms. At the moment, you can just visit my Instagram, Amanda McMahon Music. That's it.
Fantastic. And Danny.
I'd say just Instagram is the best. So it's just danny.elrassi with no hyphen. And I have just released a new single and a music video with a full album in the works. But yeah, check it out.
Fantastic.
Come say hi.
And Tony.
Thanks for having me, guys. And, check out my new single, Love to Give, now on all platforms. You can find me on my website, tonysergimusic.com, on Facebook and on Instagram. It's at Tony Sergi.
Fantastic. Well, thank you everyone so much. It was lovely meeting you all.
Thank you.
I hope you all have a great rest of your day.